Hello again everyone and welcome to the Vintage Sewing Machine Garage. Today I'm making a video of a machine that, well, quite frankly, I didn't know if it was going to be salvageable, because I didn't know what was wrong with it. And what often happens to these machines can basically ruin them from working until you replace parts that are not always easy to find. Now, I've talked to you all many times about when you first get a sewing machine and you want to bring it back to life, wake it up, restore it, overhaul it, get it ready to sew, to be always extra careful. Remember, and you've seen me harp on this many times for a reason. It happens all too often. You get a machine, someone says, "Oh, last time it was used, it sewed great," but they don't remember when it was last used. And as all of you have seen, not sometimes firsthand when you get a machine, and if not, you may have seen it on this channel. Sewing machines have moving parts, and machines like to run. When they don't run and they sit for long periods, they get cranky. Okay, things get stiff. Imagine if you've been sitting too long, or maybe you're recovering, you're convalescing, and you're finally getting to get out of bed, and your back's sore or something. You're moving slowly, because your body is designed to move, and so are machines. And they're happiest when they're used. They don't have to be used every day. And different machines have different levels of being able to sit for a long time before they get cranky. The more features, the more complexity of stitch making a machine has, the more often it needs to be used. And that actually, I'll get to in a moment, that was the source of this machine's problem. Now, what often happens is people get machines, and they can come from different periods. It can be a lot older than this machine. It can be newer than this machine. But as I've shown you in the past, a lot of machines from the heirloom period that I love and forward, they have on the outside, they have some parts made of plastic. Now there's steel and aluminum here. All of the drivetrain components in this machine are made of high quality steel. This is an heirloom quality machine. Heirloom quality to me, for those of you who are new to the channel, means if you maintain it, you can basically pass this on. These machines are literally can be passed down, and they already have been from generation to generation. So in the past, I've mentioned to you all, when you have a machine, just assume that it hasn't run in a while. Even if someone says the last time it ran, it was great. Many people don't know. It's not that they're intentionally being dishonest with you. Maybe some are. But I think at least most of the people I've gotten machines from, they're doing the best they can. They don't know about sewing machines, or they don't remember, or my relative doesn't remember, but it's a good machine. And that's about it. That's all they've got for you. So you need to sort of take responsibility if you buy the machine. Remember, I've told you, when you test it, you're looking at a machine. You don't have much time. People are like, kind of, like, do you want it or not? They don't always give you a lot of time. So you can do things like moving the hand wheel, right? Does it move? Now, if they allow you the chance to plug it in and try it, even they say, well, go ahead and try it. You're welcome to try it out. Before you do that, okay, look at the manual. If they know the model, if you know the model machine you're going to look at, study the manual. Where's the stitch width? If it has zigzag, that's a common area that gets stuck, right? This dial here affects the zigzag of a machine. And when I turn this, right now it's set to no zigzag. When I turn it, watch the needle. If you look closely, you'll see the needle swing. Okay, it's right here. It's a little subtle, but you'll see the needle swinging. If that doesn't happen, it may be a dial, it may be a lever. Different machine designs use different components. Whatever it is, if it fights you, stop. That doesn't mean it's broken, it means it's frozen, but you could end up breaking it. So you have to decide what you're going to do there. This machine, when I got this machine was brought to me by one of my past clients. In fact, they repeat clients. They've come to me with a number of machines before, and an incredible collection of machines. Now, when they got the machine, the person that sold it to them said, yeah, it works good. I've been using it. However, the owner of the machine didn't really mislead. Yes, it did so, but not the way it should. So what would happen is, in machines in general, what you'll notice is if people force moving a dial or a lever or a button, any kind of control that is plastic, if you force it, there is steel behind it in a vintage machine. That steel is often what sticks. It's not the plastic item that's stuck normally, although I have seen Berninas do this. That's a different, I think I've shown that in an earlier, one of my rare Bernina videos. But when a machine is stuck, it is normally the metal parts that are behind the plastic controls. Those are the things that freeze. And if those things are not remedied, you know, it's steel versus plastic. Which one is going to win? The steel wins, the plastic breaks, or it strips, and you're basically done for unless you can find the part. Then you've got to get the part and then find someone who is willing to do serious disassembly oftentimes to replace it, and that is if it can be disassembled. So in the earlier videos I showed of this machine, when I first got it, I was noticing, I was checking it out because the owner of the machine said, I can't control the length of the stitches. I'm getting maybe short or whatever. It won't allow me to either lengthen or shorten the stitches. Well, that's a basic feature that machines going way back, even before they had all these features, had. Now, what was interesting is you would turn the dial. So I got the machine, the owner brought it to me, and when I would turn the dial would turn, okay, but there was no, it turned too loosely, right? It just kept, it turned without almost any, you should feel some tension. You know, there's something you feel when the dial, when metal parts are moving. It moves smoothly, but you'll notice a difference, okay? And it would turn, but the stitch length did not alter. And I thought, uh-oh, I wonder if this dial has been stripped. Because if it has, that is a much more involved process if we can fix it. But as I've shown in other videos, I went inside and began looking behind the dial. And what I found was there is a metal piece. When you turn this dial, there is a pin. This looks like a fairly thick pin, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch or so. And that pin moves forward or backward. And as you adjust the stitch length, it moves a mechanism inside that eventually comes down and impacts the way your feed dogs feed, and that is what determines your stitch length. Stitch length is often also associated with the reverse. On these mechanical machines, if it has reverse, the reverse is often built in tandem with the stitch length mechanism. Not always, but in the case of many machines, including this one, that's how it's set up. So the owner also noticed, well, you know, it doesn't really work all that well in reverse. So I had to inspect that. Was the mechanism behind this plastic piece, was it broken? Because this piece, you know, just like the dial, if it's not working, please don't force it. Because if you do, chances are it will be broken if it's not already. So I went inside and I demonstrated in those earlier videos. Oh my gosh, and it took it took heat, I ended up using the valve oil that I have. I have valve oil, and I believe that I even used another penetrant to get into that place where the little pin was. It's like a shaft behind here, and trying to get it to loosen up. And eventually it did. It started moving. And once you get movement, then you can add more. I just added more valve oil and let it, you know, I just let it go through its paces. And then I added fresh sewing machine oil after I used the penetrant products. And fortunately, the machine woke up and it was not broken. It is still not clear to me how this happened. This machine was engineered in a way that when I turned the dial, even though the pin wasn't moving, the dial would still turn, and it didn't force it. Now that's just because this particular model was designed this way. We got lucky, and once I got the pin moving, we had stitch length again. We could control the stitch length. You can control it on straight, on zigzag, and even on a decorative stitch. So that is what transpired and finally allowed us to verify that the machine, not only does it have a lot of life in it. You can see here, I'll show you this is the stitch sample I made. And look at it, it does long straight stitch up here. It does a shorter straight stitch. There are other lengths, but I just showing you a few. It does zigzag, it does blind stitch. And look at that, it even does the rickrack stitch. Or I think that's, or something similar to a rickrack, okay? So then tested it on a cam. And look at the cam designs. And remember, some cam designs are just, they use what's called normal stitching on the Kenmore. But if you come over here to this side, it actually will do reverse, they're called stretch stitches. And some of the cams require, they only work in that way because if you want to get the wave pattern, you have to switch it over. So this machine was almost given up because of this, because it could have been, and I'd say 9 times out of 10, the piece has been stripped, and it would have been a real question, how much do we want? Can we find the part? And if we can we, how can we access that part? We did not have to this time. So to celebrate the good news here, I've actually done quite a lot of, you saw the sample I just showed you, and then I went back again and ended up doing more test stitching here. So I'm just going to put the machine back, put the fabric sample back in, and just show you that a machine can, when you give it another chance, it can survive and actually be made to sew again. So before you give up your machine and say, well, it was nice to have, okay? So, okay, to turn on a Kenmore from this era, there's a button here on this model. Sometimes you'll see the button, the power button on the right. This one's on the front. And if you want your sewing light, turning the machine on, power gives you a light. There is not a separate light button on these particular models. No big deal, that's just how they came. So I'm going to hold my tails here, and we are going to sew a long straight stitch. And notice that the reverse works beautifully. So it wasn't broken, it was stuck. So if you have issues with reverse on many, not all, but many vintage sewing machines, take a look at the stitch length regulator, because if it's having issues, you can sometimes have issues with your reverse and stitch length. Often, if one has a problem, the other's going to have a problem too. So I'll come over here and I'll say, well, let's do a shorter stitch, and it will gladly provide that. You'll see it feeding just a little bit more slowly. Beautiful. And I'll give it a little more gas there as we go over that heavy, thick seam. And again, you're looking at what is essentially a machine that you might have said, oh, this machine's worthless. I don't think it's going to run for me anymore. But the fact is, it just needed attention. So again, mechanical things like to run. They don't like to sit. If it has sat, that's not the end of the world. The longer it sits, the more TLC it needs to wake up. And so basically, sometimes what looks like a catastrophic case of a failure really was not. And what is interesting is that this is one of the few machines I've ever seen that its primary issue was that the person who used it had one stitch length and never changed it. Usually, the biggest issues that happen with these machines are in the zigzag. The zigzag was slow on this machine, but it actually was not as bad off as the straight stitch length selector was. Most machines are the opposite. So the famous Forrest Gump line. You never know what you're going to get. So, and I didn't. Having reverse knot work is happened. I've seen it, but it's not the most common thing. It's usually with multi-stitch machines. It's usually their cam stitching. Their zigzag is usually the biggest problem because it doesn't get used. Many of you who sew, you have been known to change the length of your stitch from every now and then. And of course, the stitch length works beautifully, as I showed all of you, on not only on the cam stitches, but of course on the zigzag. You can see where I tested the zigzag. So this is one of the only machines I have ever seen that did not like to adjust stitch length, and I could tell because the pin was so stuck that whoever owned it sewed with it for decades and never once turned it. So again, movement is good. Movement is good for our bodies, and it's good for our sewing machines. So I had no idea when I got this. I really didn't know if we were going to run into, catastrophic problems or not. So, but I told the owner I'd be happy to look at it and we'll see what we could find out. And some patience and finding the piece that was stuck paid off. And this machine is ready to run once again. I hope this was helpful for those of you who maybe have a sewing machine that's getting cranky and you think it might be, they might have issues with zigzag. Many of them do when they sit, because actually it can even happen here on one of the least likely places. You just never know. But that's what makes this sewing machine restoration hobby so much fun and such a learning experience as you discover new things. And hopefully you are discovering them with me. If you found this video useful, please consider donating to the channel. You can click on the Buy Me a Coffee link. You'll see them on any of the videos, and any donation you provide will help me find more of these machines to rescue and to make more videos. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.